Appropriation 2010-11 Estimates Bill, adjourned debate on second reading and amendment proposed thereto.
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
It's just such a delight and a pleasure to be able to take part in this appropriations debate about the budget that was delivered in this House on the 20th of May. And, sir, I join my colleague John Carter, who said the other day of the 23 budgets he had sat through in this Parliament, the 20th of May budget was the best he had ever sat through. And I want to actually extend on that. I agree with it. It was the best budget I had sat through. But the response I've had back in my electorate, sir, from the voters of Pakuranga has been it was by far the best budget that has ever been delivered. And, sir, I've been on the rough end of a pineapple of a few budgets. I remember the response we got from the mother of all budgets in '91. I wouldn't say it was universally applauded, and I can still remember some of the words. I can still remember some of the words that some of the members of Grey Power had to say to us, sir. I think it was a budget that had to be done. I'm not going to get into the past now, but it wasn't that well received. But, sir, the budget of the 20th of May this year was, in my view, a stunning budget, and it took a step in the most unbelievably right direction you can do. Sir, I have always believed that a taxation system that actually tries to chop people's income down by having very high marginal tax rates on income is wrong. And the best thing you can do is leave as much money in the hands of a taxpayer as you can possibly do, and tax things that you would like to actually see decrease over time. And one of those, of course, is spending. If you're going to go out and have people splurging on plasma screens and all sorts of other things, that is a discretionary expenditure, then that is something I'm happy for a tax to lie on. But I actually would love to move, hopefully one day, many years in the future, this nation might move to even more of an indirect tax and even less of direct tax on income. But, sir, this budget was about a rebalancing of the tax system. It did just that. And I want to just spend a couple of minutes before I talk about stuff in my own portfolio that I'm really pleased with in the budget, just responding to some of what Labor Party has said about it. The first thing I want to ask anybody out there listening to this debate is, what do you think of a party who introduced GST to New Zealand without ever canvassing it before an election, never mentioned it? Because that's right, check the Labor Party's campaign of 1984, and there was not a mutter, not a murmur, not a mention of GST, and they get into power and bang, they put it in. And then, 2 years later, again without a mutter or a murmur or a mention, and by the way, and no compensation to the affected parties, increased it by 2.5 percentage points. Now, actually, remember, that's a 25% increase on 10%. If you go from 10 to 12.5, that's a 25% increase, and not a single element of compensation to any of the beneficiary groups or the superannuitant groups. And then, when National signals that not only are we going to put it up by a smaller percentage, from going from 12.5 to 15 is not a 25% increase, it's smaller, but we will also put in place proper compensation to all affected parties at the bottom end. The howling and the screaming from the Labor Party about how evil, how dreadful, what a shock it is for National to be doing so. And I ask anybody listening to it if they can think of a word that describes that sort of behaviour. Someone who puts it in without telling you it's even coming or canvassing for it. Someone who then, after it's in for a while, increases it and then doesn't compensate, but when someone else does. And I love the absolute confusion that's in the Labor Party about the policy that Phil Goff has floated. Well, it really didn't float, really. It sort of sank. He tried to float it, about maybe we should exempt fresh fruit and vegetables. Well, what does that mean? Will that mean my truffles will now not have GST on it? What about something like caviar? How about that? Well, of course, those of us who are... Carmel Sapoloni said, who eats truffles? Well, of course, I thought it was supposed to be all us Tories rich mates that would eat that. And that's a fresh fruit and vegetable. How about we get rid of GST from truffles? I would love to be importing beautiful truffles from the south of France, rooted out by pigs, and then we won't have to pay GST. Because that's how silly this gets. That's how silly this gets. And then we get to the whether it's cooked or it's not, and whether it's in a sandwich or not. So if it's a full chicken, it's covered, but if it's a part chicken, it's not. But if it's a piece of ham, it's not. And this is... But even the Labour Party, even Mr Speaker, the Labour Party don't believe in that policy at all. They were floundering around to find something. Oh, because if they did believe in it, 9 years in office, they would have certainly changed the GST scheme if they believed in it. 9 long years in office, and they said the right thing, actually. Let's give them credit for it. The best thing about the GST structure in New Zealand is that it's flat and it applies to everything, and the moment you start trying to create exemptions, you get all sorts of anomalies on the barriers. Wherever you draw a line in the sand, you get anomalies just on the other side. So I would have thought maybe not just fresh fruit and vegetables, but say beverages. And how about sports drinks? That'll be good. Oh, I know, let's go with wine and beer. We could exempt them from GST as well, because, people rely on these things. What a nonsense. What a nonsense, sir. And I think no wonder Labour is floundering in the polls and their lead is sinking like the policy of fresh fruit and vegetables exemption, because New Zealanders know there is just no sincerity in a political party that claims to be wanting to do something and in fact doesn't even believe it themselves. And what I love is the attacks that came on Bill English for his floating of the concept of maybe in the next election and the next electoral cycle, National might look to part privatise some of the public assets. We'll campaign on it, we'll put it out to the public before the election, we'll let the public choose and they'll get to vote. That's all Bill English said, and it was a disgrace and an outrage. It was a disgrace and an outrage that National was going to sell public assets. Well, let's have a look at the list of the public assets that Labour sold. Oh, by the way, they didn't canvass on an election campaign about it. They didn't share that with anybody. They didn't say, oh, if you vote for us, we'll get in and sell some state assets like the National Party policy is. Oh no, sir. Their policy was a lot more brutal. It was, once we're in there, we'll flog them off. And Telecom...
Point of order. I call a point of order for Sue Kedsley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could you just remind the member that he does have a microphone and there is no need to shout, because I'm actually having difficulty over here with the level of tone.
Well, with respect to the member, that is not a point of order.
Correct.
And I understand that, but a point of order is about the order of the House. So let's just be clear about that. It's not a point of order. And but the point has been made that the volume is a bit high, but in part that's because of some of the other background noise around the House. So just draw members' attention to that. Call the Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr Speaker, thank you. I'm the first to admit I'm getting so excited about the budget from the 20th of May, and it's hard not to get excited. It's hard not to get carried away, and it's hard not to go back to your electorate and hear the response of the public back there and not just feel some form of overwhelming joy. But, sir, I want to now talk about a couple of things in the budget. And one of the items in this year's budget is one of the biggest ticket items ever, sir, the leaky homes package. And, sir, I have to say that was one of the hardest pieces of work we've had to do in government, because we're coming in at a time when the economic cycle where there is no spare money, where the government is borrowing money to keep the ship afloat, and where the Finance Minister quite readily tells every minister, I don't know what part of no you don't understand, but we don't have that leeway. But, sir, to be fair, what was good about it is John Key, our Prime Minister, said, we just cannot sit back and do nothing. We cannot just sit back and see the tens of thousands of families in this country living in a leaky home with no potential to move forward from where they are stuck and not do anything. And so we began a process of trying to do negotiations. They were tough. Everybody wanted more than the government could put up, but we finally got to a package, sir, that not only I think is a fantastic outcome, but that I'm damn proud of. And, sir, what we're saying to New Zealanders, if they want to buy into it, that's people that have got a leaky home. It is their choice. It is a voluntary package. No one has to take it.